Welcome to. The content of the briefing includes the politics behind Canada and India's diplomatic tiff. Canada warns its citizens to remain vigilant in India travel advice. London, Ontario, gives green light to first 3 homeless hub locations despite concerns from residents. How Halifax is dealing with climate change and what other action is needed. The Gardener is divisive, derided, ugly. A new plan for under it aims to change all that. The politics behind Canada and India's diplomatic tiff. Japan Times. The Canadian government's response to the assassination of a Sikh leader in British Columbia has caused tension between Ottawa and New Delhi. The Canadian government has condemned the assassination and called for a thorough investigation, but has also expressed concern over human rights violations in India. While the Canadian government's stance is seen as soft power righteousness in Ottawa, it has ruffled feathers in New Delhi. The Indian government has accused Canada of interfering in its internal affairs and has cancelled a meeting with Canadian officials. The tension between the two countries is likely to continue as the Canadian government has promised to continue raising human rights issues with India. Canada warns its citizens to remain vigilant in India travel advice. The Independent. Canada has issued an update to its travel advisory for India, warning its citizens to remain vigilant and exercise caution due to recent diplomatic tensions between the two countries. The rift began when Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau accused the Indian government of involvement in the killing of a Canadian national, Hardeep Singh Nijjar. India has called the allegations absurd and suspended visa services for Canadian nationals. Canada has now warned its citizens of protests and a rise in negative sentiment towards Canada on social media. India has also advised its citizens in Canada to exercise caution due to growing anti-India activities. London, Ontario, gives green light to first 3 homeless hub locations despite concerns from residents. CBC. London City Council has approved the locations for the first 3 hubs that would give round-the-clock services to the city's most vulnerable population, focusing first on women and female-identifying individuals, youth and Indigenous people. In a 9-6 vote on Monday, Council accepted proposals from Atlosa Family Healing Services, Youth Opportunities Limited and the Canadian Mental Health Association, CMHA, Thames Valley. The organizations have been granted a total $15 million to run the hubs over a 2-year period. How Halifax is dealing with climate change and what other action is needed. CBC. Halifax is 3 years into its climate change plan, Halifact, which aims to have a net zero economy by 2050. The city is funding the plan through a climate action tax on residents' property tax bills, which amounted to around $20 million in the 2021 budget. With a team of around 30 staff, the city is working on 46 actions, including installing electric vehicle chargers, electrifying the bus fleet, integrating climate change into municipal decision-making, tree planting, and assessing coastal risks. The city is planning to launch a new program for all buildings in the municipality, including private homes, to provide a full suite of options for making changes to properties, such as installing solar panels or preparing for hurricane, flood or extreme heat events. Retrofits are key because 70% of Halifax's total greenhouse gas emissions are created by fuel and electricity consumption from residential, commercial, and industrial buildings. The city is also looking to create a district energy system for the new Cogswell area with heat from the neighboring wastewater plant. The Gardener is divisive, derided, ugly. A new plan for under it aims to change all that. The Toronto Star. The Bentway Conservancy has drafted a plan to transform 6.5 kilometers of land under Toronto's Gardiner Expressway into a pedestrian and cyclist-friendly corridor. The area would include spaces for skateboarders, art installations and public performances, as well as shops. The initiative has been inspired by the success of a skating rink created under the expressway in 2018. The Under Gardiner corridor would begin at Dufferin Street and would extend to the Don Valley Parkway. The Conservancy hopes the project will be funded by the city, private philanthropy and business interests. The Bentway plans to align the project with other city works in the area to leverage existing investments. The Gardiner Expressway is currently being rehabilitated and the work is due to be completed in 2030. The Conservancy hopes to create a continuous public space to provide new access to the waterfront. Edward Keenan, Why Girls Still Can't Catch a Break from Toronto's Icetime Policy. The Toronto Star. Girls in Toronto are dropping out of sports at a much higher rate than boys, with a third of girls quitting by their teenage years compared to just 10% of boys. The author of this Toronto Star op-ed, Dave Feschuk, believes that one reason for this drop-off is the lack of options for girls when it comes to sports teams and leagues. He argues that girls-only teams and leagues are essential to retaining girls in sports, but they are few and far between in Toronto. Festchuk also points out that the city's permit policy is a barrier to creating more options for girls, as existing organizations that are dominated by boys are given priority when it comes to field and ice time. The policy leans heavily on incumbency, meaning that new organizations trying to address the lack of options for girls are often left out. Festchuk argues that while the city's policy of giving preference to community youth leagues and established organizations is important, there needs to be more consideration given to addressing the needs of those who feel left out. Understanding the appeal of a new old Porsche with a $3 million price and 3-year wait list. The Globe and Mail. California-based restoration and modification shop, Singer Vehicle Design, is so far booked solid for 3 years. Founded in 2009 by Rob Dickinson, a vintage Porsche enthusiast, the company is staffed by 300 workers in the US and 200 in the UK, and has restored more than 300 Porsche 911s. The cars are not for sale but are customized for individual clients. One client, Faisal Huda, says his restomodded car feels more alive than a new vehicle. You get all those little quirks and characteristics and nuances of the old air-cooled 911, and you've got it in a very modern, updated presentation. Singer's latest customization, the $2.7 million Porsche 911 reimagined by Singer, Dynamics and Lightweighting Study, DLS, Turbo, was unveiled last summer and is a stripped-down car with a 3.8-liter flat-six engine and twin turbochargers producing 700 horsepower. The company spokesperson confirmed that Singer has no plans to offer any EV restorations or retrofit services. Will 3.45 million new homes solve Canada's housing crisis? The Globe and Mail. Canada's Federal Housing Agency, CMHC, has stated that 3.45 million new homes need to be built by 2030 in order to address the country's housing crisis. The lack of supply has been a long-standing issue, particularly in expensive markets like Toronto and Vancouver. The Globe and Mail's real estate reporter, Rochelle Younglai, discusses the feasibility of ramping up construction and the consequences of not addressing the housing crisis. New plaque recognizes Sudbury, Ontario schools' defiance of Ontario law that made French education illegal. CBC. The Uptown Sudbury Community Action Network and the Ontario Heritage Trust have unveiled a plaque to commemorate the St. Louis de Gonzague School in Sudbury, Ontario. The school, which was founded in 1915, defied a law that made French language education illegal after grade 2. The school secretly taught students in French until Regulation 17 was repealed in 1927. The Community Action Network campaigned for the school building to receive a heritage designation, which was granted in 2020. The new plaque recognizes the school's history as a French-language institution until its closure in 2000. Piping plover population steady at PEI National Park and Fiona may have helped. CBC. The piping plover population on Prince Edward Island, PEI, Canada, is showing signs of stability after being hit by post-tropical storm Fiona last year. 17 chicks from 10 breeding pairs hatched on the shores of PEI National Park this summer, slightly above Parks Canada's targets. The numbers have slowly risen over the last 3 years after several years of decline. Factors that may have contributed to the rebound include a seasonal ban on domestic animals in the national park, as well as the creation of coastal habitats following the storm. However, the future of the endangered species remains uncertain due to threats from climate change. Martin Reg Cohn, Doug Ford says Ontario is better off since he was elected. Who does he think he's kidding? The Toronto Star. Doug Ford's credibility, integrity, and electability are under threat as his government faces numerous scandals. However, the Premier is trying to shape the narrative by asking whether people's lives are more affordable today than they were 5 years ago, and answering that they are. Ford is trying to get ahead of the opposition, but his claims of improvement seem unpersuasive given the housing crisis and affordability challenges faced by many Ontarians. Matt Elliott, how Doug Ford's new planning rules have made things worse for Toronto's housing crisis. The Toronto Star. Toronto City's planning department has seen its vacancy rate rise to 17% from 13% last year, as the city looks to hire more staff to deal with new provincial development rules. The City Council has taken action to increase compensation in a bid to attract more city planners but has so far failed to fill a fifth of the positions. The department said the situation had been made worse by changes to planning processes imposed by the Government of Ontario Premier Doug Ford. Our justice system has lurched into total dysfunction. The Toronto Star. Ontario's Legal Aid Assistance Program for criminal defendants is underfunded and struggling to provide meaningful legal representation for those who need it. In addition, a lack of planning and resources has caused Toronto's court system to shut down multiple times this year, resulting in criminal prosecutions being delayed and potentially violating the constitutional guarantee prohibiting excessive delays. These issues are likely to continue for a long time and will damage confidence in the court system and its ability to deliver justice in a timely manner. Andrew Phillips, Justin Trudeau has fallen short on Canada's relations with India. The Toronto Star. The Trudeau government in Canada has been accused of pandering to extremists in the Sikh community, according to an opinion piece in the Toronto Star. The author argues that Canada needs to address India's concerns about the country being used as a base for agitation by those pushing for an independent Sikh state, known as Khalistan. The author cites examples of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau attending events that featured Khalistan flags and posters of Sikh extremists, as well as publicly commenting on issues in Punjab. The author suggests that Canada needs to prioritize its relationship with India and put the national interest above the interests of any particular community. Why the richest contract in Canadian automaking history might not be good enough for GM and Stellantis workers. The Toronto Star. The contract agreement reached by Unifor with Ford Motor Company may not be the template for agreements at Stellantis and GM due to tepid approval from workers. The deal, which includes wage hikes of 10% in the first year, 2% in the second and 3% in the third, was approved by just 54% of Ford workers. This closeness in the ratification vote makes it harder to convince GM and Stellantis workers to stick with the pattern, and it also makes the GM and Stellantis executives question whether or not the union's leadership can deliver the membership. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Dr. Six, your resident observer from the 6 Degrees world, bringing you the latest news and analysis from around the globe. Today, we delved into the diplomatic tensions between Canada and India, which have been sparked by the assassination of a Sikh leader in British Columbia. While Canada has condemned the assassination and called for a thorough investigation, it has also expressed concerns about human rights violations in India. This soft power righteousness has not gone down well in New Delhi, with the Indian government accusing Canada of interference in its internal affairs. The tension between the two countries is likely to continue as Canada has promised to keep raising human rights issues with India. In other news, Canada has issued a travel advisory for its citizens traveling to India due to the recent diplomatic tensions. The rift began when Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau accused the Indian government of involvement in the killing of a Canadian national. India, in turn, called the allegations absurd and suspended visa services for Canadian nationals. Both countries have cautioned their citizens to exercise caution and vigilance while abroad. Shifting our focus to Canada itself, the City of London, Ontario, has given the green light to the first 3 homeless hub locations. These hubs will provide round-the-clock services to the city's most vulnerable population, with a particular focus on women, youth, and Indigenous people. This is an important step towards addressing the issue of homelessness in the city and providing much-needed support to those in need. Halifax, on the other hand, is taking proactive measures to combat climate change. The city is 3 years into its climate change plan, Halifax, which aims to achieve a net-zero economy by 2050. Halifax is funding this plan through a climate action tax and has already implemented several initiatives, such as installing electric vehicle chargers and assessing coastal risks. The city's efforts are commendable, and it serves as an example for other cities looking to combat climate change. Moving on to Toronto, there are plans to transform the land under the Gardiner Expressway into a pedestrian and cyclist-friendly corridor. The Bentway Conservancy has drafted a plan to create a continuous public space, complete with skateboarding areas, art installations, and shops. This initiative has been inspired by the success of a skating rink created under the expressway in 2018. The project aims to provide new access to the waterfront and revitalize the area. In a more serious note, we discussed the drop-off in girls' participation in sports in Toronto. A lack of options for girls, coupled with the city's permit policy that favors existing organizations dominated by boys, has contributed to this decline. The author of this op-ed argues for the importance of girls-only teams and leagues to keep girls engaged in sports. It is crucial that the city's policy takes into account the needs of those who feel left out and create more opportunities for girls to participate in sports. On a lighter note, we explored the world of vintage Porsche restorations. Singer Vehicle Design, a California-based shop, has a 3-year waiting list for its custom restorations of Porsche 911s. These cars are not for sale but are tailored to individual clients, combining the quirks of the old models with modern updates. The demand for these restorations highlights the enduring appeal of classic cars and the craftsmanship involved in their restoration. We also touched upon Canada's housing crisis, with the Federal Housing Agency stating that 3.45 million new homes need to be built by 2030 to address the issue. The lack of supply, particularly in expensive markets like Toronto and Vancouver, has been a long-standing problem. The feasibility of ramping up construction and the consequences of not addressing the housing crisis were discussed in detail. Lastly, we explored the importance of recognizing historical landmarks, such as the St. Louis de Gonzague School in Sudbury, Ontario. The school defied a law that made French language education illegal and secretly taught students in French until the law was repealed. The unveiling of a plaque to commemorate the school's history is a significant step in preserving and acknowledging the contributions of French language institutions. That's all for today's news roundup. Remember, these are just snapshots of the stories happening around us. I encourage you to share your thoughts and ideas in the comments section. What do you think about these issues? And don't forget, there's always more to the story than meets the eye. Stay curious, my friends. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.